Alrighty, we're getting to the point pretty close here where we're going to have our section on individual operators. And for this particular thing, learning operators, there's so many operators. I find it very, very valuable to have a handful of resources to use in understanding those operators. Everything from documentation to actually physically reading the source code. And in this video, I want to talk about those resources and how they relate to one another, and some warnings on how to properly read them. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is, you see this thing on the left? If you are, I'm on GitHub, by the way. I use a special stylish theme for my dark theme. You can find it on the stylish gallery. But the cool thing is, the thing on the left, if you plan on spelunking around GitHub repositories, go install this Chrome extension if you have Chrome. And that extension is called Octotree. So be sure to go ahead and grab that if you plan on jumping around many GitHub repositories. It's very, 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 very useful. Anyway, so where am I right now? I am at reactivex/RxJS. Now, I made a point to say ReactiveX because there are two repositories you're going to be taking a look at. This repository is for version 5. So this is the version we're actually using right now. Now, the problem is that most of your examples, and in fact, when you Google a reactive.js operator, are going to send you to a different repository. They're going to send you to this. This is Reactive-Extensions RxJS. This repository is for version 4. So, I want to make it very clear that 4 and 5 have differences. So if you see yourself on Reactive Extensions, that is not the version you're using. However, the documentation for this repository is significantly better than the documentation for this one. Now, for this one, we can jump over into our documentation here, reactivex.io/RxJS. And this is an automatically generated documentation. So basically, you're not going to find anything here that you can't find in the source code itself. And there's a lot of documentation, but it lacks in examples. If, however, you Google a operator, you'll often find yourself in this repository. Underneath the doc folder is a lot of it's a substantial documentation on reactive extensions. You'll be spending most of your time under API core operators, where you get documentation for all of the operators. However, not all of these operators exist in version 5, and a lot of them have been renamed. So if you find yourself finding some really, really nice documentation here that is really, really helpful, but you want to convert it into RX5, what you can do is hop on over to this page. This page is under the new ReactiveX repository. In fact, it's right there. It's right at the root, migration.md. And this document will describe the differences in operators between the two versions. So as you see, things like and controlled have been nuked, whereas things like select has been renamed to map, or return was removed and just was removed and it's turned into of, for example, or replay is now publish replay, and so on and so on. It also splits some operators. For example, delay used to be just one function, but now with 2 overloads, but now it's 2 functions, one delay and one called delay when. So it's important to understand the relationship between these two repositories. This is the new one, and you are welcome to look at their documentation here. You can look at other documentation here, but it's mostly just operator creation, maintainer guidelines, blah, blah, blah. They haven't really fleshed out their docs in this repository yet. Hopefully they will in the future. But again, if you find yourself reading on reactive-extensions, you might have to map the method names that you see here through this migration.md file to know what those method names are in the new version of Reactive Extensions. But anyway, it's a very, 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 very good resource, and I recommend you guys take a look at it. And of course, it's open source, so we can actually look at the source code if you're ever interested in the behavior. Now, some of the source code is a little scary. It's all written in TypeScript as well. And if we go to source into observable, we can, for example, see what does our from observable do? And we see some TypeScript, which looks very much like ES 2015, except we have type annotations provided by TypeScript. We can actually go in and we can read this code if we wanted to. And I find it very, very helpful. For example, the from observable, you can see right here, it takes in a array, it can take in a promise, it can take in a array like, or an iterator. So you can kind of see exactly what the details are. It is a little intimidating, this source code, but when you have a question and you're not sure how something works, it's invaluable to read through this. Anyway, that is the source code and that is the documentation. So especially this documentation in the old repository is very, very helpful. It's very, very helpful, and it's generally what you're going to get on Google. Next up, Marbles. This is an excellent website to go in and play around with different operators. And there's not all of the operators are listed here. But what this website does is it gives you interactive marble diagrams. So what is a marble diagram? A marble diagram is a diagram that represents a observable sequence and the operators applied. So what we have here on this merge operator, that's the default operator here, we have an observable here, and he produces an event at 20, and sometime later, an item at 20. Sometimes later, an item of 40, and then an item of 60, and then so on, so on. And I can adjust the time that it takes. And then you see this, this end right here. This is when the observable completes. So then we have another observable, another one that produces 2 ones across each other. And then finally, we have the final observable, the result of combining these 2 observables with the merge operator, and we have that result down here. And we can drag these along, we kind of get an idea of what's going on. So the merge operator, we clearly see, takes items from multiple observables and merges them into one. But we can also do things like map. We've already seen map. So map, in this case, we have 1 observable, and then we have a map where it multiplies that by 10, and we see what happens. So no matter when these are produced, they'll always go through that map function and come out differently. So each one of these circles is an item emitted at the end. And of course, we have our complete event. We can look at our flat map, wherever that is, or select many. Does it have select many? I forget. No, it doesn't. That's right. But we can look at like debounce, for example. We've already seen debounce. Remember how it'll debounce it, so when we are typing on the autocomplete thing, it'll only ever emit an item if there hasn't been an item for an X amount of time? Well, that's debounce. Check this out. See, if I move this 2 closer to that 1 goes away and is no longer emitted. Only the 2 is emitted. But also note that it delays that item emission. And so we can move that here, and we can take over that 2, and now we only have 3. And so on and so on. So this is a great resource for you learning about and investigating the different operators and seeing graphically how they work. I'm going to show you guys one last example, and that is this, which is RxVision Examples Playground. And what this is a place where you can visualize the subscriptions and operators and observables of actual code. So for example, right here, we get the button, we get a clicks from event, we subscribe to those clicks. So you notice here, we're subscribing directly to the button click event. And then we have values, which is simply a map of clicks. So we map all the clicks into numbers. Then we get less 1, which will subtract 1 from each one of these values, and times 2, which will multiply by 2 each one of these values. And then we subscribe to times 2 twice, and we subscribe to values once. And if I hit click me, I'll hit it twice because the lines don't seem to show up on the first iteration. We see the result of the click event. We see our first subscription, which is this one, just immediately receiving that value. And then we have our 3 maps. Our first map, which is subscribed to right here as our last subscription, goes immediately straight down to that value. Our second map is provides two of these operations. The first operation is, of course, the first map, and the second operation is the less one, and then the third operation is the times two, and then so on. So it's a way that you can visualize the streams. And you can take in, and once you start getting more comfortable with reactive extensions, you can come in here and you can put in code and you can visualize how it's working. So I recommend checking this place out on occasion if you get stuck and need something to visualize your streams with. But anyway, I think that's all the resources I wanted to talk about. So I guess we'll see you guys in the next video.